Well, welcome to this special edition of Conversations That Matter. I want to talk to you about Project Reconciliation, which in essence is your initiative to buy majority control of the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Yes.
Why is it important that First Nations have 51% ownership of the pipeline?
Well, I think first off, it's important that First Nations or Indigenous peoples get involved economically, and the fact that we've been allowed to participate in such a such an offering, I guess, with the Trans Mountain Pipeline, it means a lot to our people. We've been economically starved out for all these years, and in order for us to move out of managing poverty into managing wealth, we need to get involved. But more so, from the fact that we are concerned, about the our relationship with the environment, the water, air, and the land, so. And having that ownership, that the majority ownership, gives that comfort, gives the comfort, to First Nations that our interests are going to be looked after. As much as we know that the standards in Canada when it comes to safety and so on and so forth, our environmental standards is top notch. We still have those First Nations or Indigenous peoples that believe, that something is being left out. Well, this is the safeguard, and to acknowledge that and to represent that.
Where are you at in your discussions with the Government of Canada about being able to take control of the pipeline?
Well, we've been back and forth with them, sharing, updating them where we're at. We submitted a proposal. Here's what our intention is. Here's what we're after. Here's why, and so on and so. So when we do that, we've had one sidebar with the finance minister, but nothing, it wasn't formal. It was informal. But we have talked to the bureaucrats in Ottawa, and we shared with them, and they've been straight up in regards to acknowledging that they appreciate our update to them, and they really like they like our model.
Yes.
Right.
So what does the implementation or the acceptance of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People in British Columbia do to help you in your efforts to move forward to take ownership control of the pipeline?
Well, I think it's being a former chief of my community, I know I don't know exactly, but I know how I want it to be approached. I know how I expected industry to approach our nation, so on and so. So I've been taking those lessons and applying them, and not getting aggressive with anybody, being very respectful, and taking the time that's needed to acknowledge and respect the protocols and the understandings, and there is those that support and those that don't, and so United Nations Declaration to me, it's acknowledging that there's economic opportunity in there. It's mentioned in there, the partnerships, the relationships, and how you go about that. It's not defined, it's the process is not defined. So it's working through, in helping, engage with First Nations in regards to how they would like to be engaged. And so I think it creates a huge opportunity for industry, for government, for our company, to move in and to do business.
Bill Gallagher, who wrote Resource Rulers, are you familiar with the book?
No.
Well, he points out, and he's worked with Chief Joe Dion from the Frog Lake Band in Alberta, has said that the future of the Canadian economy really is in the hands of First Nations. If we take a look at the recommendations of the United Nations Declaration, coupled with the outcome of the Silcotin decision, we can't move forward without First Nations. And so why wouldn't it make sense for First Nations to have a controlling interest in a pipeline that is so vitally linked to the resources of this country?
Well, I totally agree with that statement. I believe that it's high time that people realize and recognize, that there has to be a relationship. There has to be that partnership with First Nations, as well as on First Nations side. They got to understand, realize as well that, that not all non-Native people are bad, as well as not all Indigenous people are bad, right?
Right.
So we gotta come to a point where we can reconcile that, and that's one of the points why I came up with the name Project Reconciliation. Is to
Right.
challenge the government. Talked about reconciliation. All right, I'm going to challenge you on your on the language that you're using, and this is why. So in order for Canada to move forward, right? I believe that that the economy has been brought to its knees, on the resource side, without First Nations contributing to that.
Yes.
But it's the First Nations, the Indigenous peoples, who are going to get them out of that situation, back on its feet, moving forward. And that's exactly what Project Reconciliation is about.
The majority of First Nations that are along that pipeline route have signed on with Trans Mountain. There are
impact benefit agreements.
Not everyone has. Do you believe that having ownership with a First Nations management group or ownership group is going to be able to help to address the concerns of some of those people, some of those nations that have not signed on?
I think eventually, but it's going to, what is it going to take? What's the understanding? Right now, I think there's a lot of confusion, or maybe, to a degree of confusion, but there's also the point that there's so much influence coming from all over. Not only people outside of British Columbia, but people outside of Canada. So much money coming in. This organization, that organization is getting pumped with cash, to do this, to do that. And at the end of the day, our people are hurting. Nobody, I wish every First Nation was in a position that Squamish is in, and that other First Nations communities who are doing well are in. But we're not. Right? It's probably, 7% of First Nations, if that, are doing economically well, and all the power to them. The fact of the matter is that we have a majority that are struggling. The fact of the matter is that we still have people, that are homeless, nowhere to go on Hastings Avenue. Street,
Yeah.
right? And any other urban center, right? Even in our own First Nations communities, we have homelessness. We have people who are dying of suicides, the epidemic, so on and so forth. So how do we address that without continuously pointing at government? It's your fault. It's your fault. We at some point we have to quit pointing.
Yes.
And take the bulls by the horn and change the reality for ourselves, so we can be content that we did it without the support of anybody else at the same game as any other company that wants to go forward would do it.
And that is one of the many compelling points as to why I hope you are successful in your bid. Thank you very much for coming in and doing this. I know that time is of the essence for you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.